And here we are in our 3D skin shop. I can select the default skin here on the left. And if I hit play, here is our player with a white skin. I can instead press the red skin, equip it, hit play, and here's our red skin. We can also have different character models, like for example this skin, which has a hat. And different skins have no interaction whatsoever with the actual player logic, so the movement of our player isn't dependent on the skin that we choose. Hi, I'm Ricky. Today we are making a 3D skin shop in Unity, step by step in a beginner-friendly way. This will be very similar to the 2D skin shop that I made before on the channel, but you don't need to have watched that in order to understand this video. And remember, you can always just download the entire project from GitHub for free, link in the description. This project will be split into multiple parts. In this video we'll see how to equip a certain skin and how to instantiate it onto our player. Alright, so let's start. I'm gonna make some very basic UI so that you can choose which skin to equip. You can of course skip this part and I'll make a very quick recap at the end. Alright, when I make UI, when I have to make a new menu, I will start by putting a text that says what menu we are inside. And I always use TextMesh Pro. You don't have to use TextMesh Pro if you don't want to, but I highly suggest that you start using it. Before we change the text, let me select the canvas and set the UI scale mode to scale with screen size and set the reference resolution to be the same of my PC. My PC is 1920 by 1080. And also check Pixel Perfect to make the UI look a bit better. If your display is not set to be the same size of your computer, do so right now. If you want to know what is the screen resolution of your computer, you can go to the website whatismyscreenresolution.net. After you know your resolution, you can click here, go to the plus sign, you can add a label to this new resolution, and then set the resolution here, and click OK. I already have this resolution, so I'm going to hit cancel, and then you can select the resolution in here. This way, even if we decrease or increase the game window, the resolution is going to stay the same. And by setting the canvas scaler to have the same resolution of our window here, our canvas is going to fit very nicely all over screen borders. Alright, let me select the text that we made now. I've called it 3D Skin Shop, and I'm also going to rename it. It's extremely important to always rename all your items in the hierarchy. Let me also change the font to Bangers. And now I'm going to go into 2D mode and make this fit the top part of the screen. And then let's align it to the center and the middle and increase the font size. Alright, so that's a good start, but I don't want this text to be floating around in our world. So instead, let's put this text inside a panel. Canvas, UI, panel. I renamed it Shop Panel, and you can see that by default it fits the entirety of the canvas. So let me put the shop text inside the panel, and now it appears on top. I'm also going to select the shop text and put the anchor points at the top here. Usually it's fine to put the anchor points at a certain corner or on the center, but if you're not sure where to put them, just stick them to be exactly the same as the size of the UI item. This way, if we change the screen resolution, so if you were to play this game on another computer, you can see that the text stays at the top. While if we put the anchor points at the bottom, and this is wrong, if we change the resolution, you can see that now the text kinda floats away. Alright, I'm also gonna select the shop panel now, and I'm gonna select the image color to be non-transparent. And I'm also gonna give it a nice azure color. To actually select our skin, I'm gonna make a new panel inside the shop panel. And this one, I don't want to fit it inside the entirety of the screen, so I'm going to resize it. And I'm also going to set the anchor points to be the same of the UI element. And now inside the skins panel, I'm gonna put the actual skins. You can of course choose whatever kind of template for your skins. In my case, I'm just gonna put an image of the skin and a button to buy it. But instead of putting these two elements apart, we're gonna group them together inside another panel. I've resized it a bit, just so it doesn't fit the entirety of the skins panel, but I don't want to worry about making this skin panel perfect, because we're gonna change it based on how we decide to show the skins image. For now, I'm just gonna put it, let's say, on the left side, and change the anchor points as well, but we are probably gonna change this in the future. For now, let's just add the other elements. So we set a skin image to give us a preview, so UI, image, and I'm gonna resize it. Again, it doesn't really matter for now, this is just a placeholder. We see how to make it look better in the future. For now, let's just put the anchor points like this, and let's make the button. And remember to make the button a child of the skin panel, not of the skin image. And I'm gonna move this at the button and resize it like so. And then inside the button, I'm gonna set the text and increase the font size and set it to bangers as well. And we say equip. And now back into the button. I'm also gonna change the normal color from white to the opposite of azure, so orange. And to make it look a bit prettier, we can also add a shadow component. So add a component, shadow. This will give it a bit of a shadow in the direction that we want to make it pop up a bit. Finally, I'm gonna make a prefab of the skin panel that we just made, and then duplicate it, and bring it on the right. This way, the skin panels are gonna share the same template. Finally, we want a button to leave the skin shop and play the game. So we need to make a new button. Instead of making a new button though, we can just duplicate one of these equip buttons, and in the hierarchy, let's bring it outside of a skins panel. And then move it down. I'm gonna change the names. And make sure that the hierarchy reflects the UI. So in this case, the skin shop text is at the top, so the shop text here in the hierarchy is also at the top. You can see the skin panels are in the middle, so the object is in the middle, and so on. And that's it for basic UI. This is a nice start which we can build upon. Alright, and for a quick recap, we made a new canvas, we made a shop panel, and inside the shop panel we put everything. We put a text at the top and a button at the bottom. This button, much like everything else, doesn't do anything at the moment. In the middle we put a panel which holds our skins. Each skin is a prefab that we made, and inside there's an image and a button. And that's it. Alright, so the overall layout for this scene is over. Now I'm gonna make a very quick scene in which we can test our game. So I'm gonna go to scenes, and before I make a new one, I'm gonna rename this one. Make sure to always rename your scenes in chronological order. So the scene number 0 should be named 0, and then the name of the content of the scene. If I make a new scene, and the scene is supposed to be after, I'm gonna rename this 01. And in the build settings, I'm gonna put the scenes as is. Perfect. Now in this new scene, I'm just gonna make a cube to act as our ground. I'm gonna go to 3D mode and move the camera up a little bit and rotate it just so I can see the ground. This part of the game is going to be the actual game of your project. This is just a sample scene that represents your actual game. And to represent the player, I'm going to make a capsule. The main difference between 2D and 3D skin comes here. With 2D, we can just simply change the sprite. With 3D, we have to change the whole model. We separate the player logic from the player model. So I'm actually going to rename this capsule that we made into player model. And then do right click, create empty parent. And I'm going to rename this new empty game object player. What's really important is that player model has a 0, 0, 0 for position and rotation. We're going to use the player model for the model and the colliders, while we use the player for the actual movement. And now when we change the 3D skin, we're just going to change the player model. So for now, let's just select our player, and let's create and add a new component called skin loader. My default class for Unity is a bit different from yours probably, so make sure that before you do anything, your script layout looks like mine. So we have the Unity engine library, the class declaration that inherits from model behavior, and nothing else. Let's make a public GameObject property called skin2load. And in awake, so when the game starts, we want to instantiate the skin inside our player model. We want to set our player model to the skin load. I'm going to show you later better what that means. For now, let's just instantiate skin2load. We also want to set the skin2load to be a child of our player, exactly like the player model I showed you. To set the transform parent of an instantiated game object automatically, we can add a new parameter, and as a parameter, add the transform parent. In this case, we put this skin loader script inside the player, so we can use our own transform as the parent. Let's save, and let's go back to Unity. I'm going to take the player model and make it into a prefab. We can now delete the player model, and inside our player, let's use the prefab that we just deleted as the skin to load. Now our actual player is still here. You can see that it's still in the scene. But now if we hit play, the actual skin model is only going to be loaded when we actually play the game. And you can see that by setting the transform inside the instantiate function, our player model is a child of our player game object. To give you a better idea of this hierarchy of the player structure, I'm going to select the player and then make and add a new component for the player movement. You can of course skip this passage if you already have a player movement script. In my case, I'm gonna make some very simple transform position translation. This is an extremely basic type of movement. What you really just need to care about is this speed value, which by default we set to 1, and it multiplies the amount of space that we move when we use the keyboard. If we now play, I can move left and right with the player, and you can see that the player model is following the player. What I now want is being able to change this skin to load to reflect the different skins in our game. Let's actually make these new skins though. So I'm gonna bring back the player model inside our player. And to make a new skin, I'm gonna first have to unlink the prefab from this particular game object. So prefab, unpack completely. And now I'm gonna rename this into another skin and change it up a bit. In my case, I'm simply gonna make it red. So I'm gonna create a new material and change the albedo to red. I'm gonna give it to the new skin, and now our new skin is red. Much like before, we drag it into our assets to make a prefab, and then we delete it. And now in our player, we still have as the skin to load reference the original player model, the white one. If we want our player to be red, we just change skin to load to this new skin, and now when we play, our skin is red. And you can see that the player movement is the same as before. We can also change how the player movement behaves, so I'm going to set the speed to 2. And now if I close the game, change the skin to load to the original player model, I'm going to set back the speed to 2 as well, and if I play, you can see that nothing has changed, only the player model has been affected. Separating the player logic from the player model is essential to have a skin system. Alright, now we just need a way to change the skin to load value from our skin shop scene. So let's open skin loader and let's set the skin to load value to static. Static values are kept in between scenes. That means that we can access the skin to load value even if we don't have a reference to the player, even if we don't have a reference to the skin loader, even if we are in a different scene. Because static values are not dependent on a specific scene, we can change this value from our skin shop. If you go back to Unity though, you can see that value has disappeared from the inspector. That's because static values are not dependent from a scene, and therefore you can't serialize them. So right now, if we hit play, you see that we get an error in the console because the value is null. We're gonna worry about that later in the future. For now, let's go back to the shop, and inside our canvas, inside the shop panel, and let's select one of the skins panel. Let's make and add a new component, and I'm gonna call it skin panel. Before we do anything, you can see that our skin panel component has a little plus sign here. That's because we added a component that isn't within the original prefab. So we can go in the menu here and do add a component, apply to prefab skin panel. This way, the other prefab will also have a skin panel component. There's also another way to do this. Let's remove the component. And you can see that now it says removed. Much like before, we can do remove component, apply to prefab skin panel. And now all the other prefabs also have their component removed. A better way of modifying prefabs is to open the prefab itself. So let's double click skin panel and let's add a component here. You can see that we don't have a plus sign here. That's because we are modifying the prefab directly. If you go back to the scene, you can see that the prefabs, they all have the skin panel component. Let's open again the prefab, and let's then open the skin panel script. In here, we want a value to represent the skin to equip. And second, we want a function to actually equip it. And to equip a skin, it is really simple. We call the skin loader, and we don't have a reference to the skin loader directly, but because the value I want to change is static, the skin to load value, we don't need a reference to the skin loader. We can just say skin loader dot skin to load. And finally, we assign it the skin to equip. And that's it. Let's go back to Unity. Let's select the equip skin button. And for the button function, let's assign the skin panel script equip skin. Back to our shop scene, we can now select our first skin panel and set the skin I want to equip. I'm gonna put the default player model in the left skin and the new skin, the one with the red material, in the right skin panel. Now we have a way of equipping different skins. The only thing that is left is being able to go to the actual level. So in the hierarchy, I'm going to make a new empty game object for scene functions. Make sure to always organize your hierarchy. An easy way of doing this is using empty game object labeled as equal signs. So I'm going to create a new empty game object, fill in a bunch of equal signs, and then copy this name. I'm gonna then reset the position so it stays on 0, 0, 0 and turn the game object off. I'm gonna use this to divide the game objects in the hierarchy. And when you're done, select all the game objects that you created. And because some of them are duplicated, we'll have a different name at the end. So I'm just gonna go here and paste the name that we copied before. I usually put the camera and the light at the top, the manager game objects here right after. If I have some 2D or 3D stuff like the ground and the player, I put it after the managers, and right at the end I put the canvas. Let's select the scene functions, and let's make another new component to change scene. I've called it scene functions exactly like the game object. In here, let's make a function to load the level. To change scenes in Unity, we have to first import the Unity engine.scenemanagement library. Then, in our load level function, we call scenemanager.loadScene, and we have to put the index of the scene I want to load. And the index of the scene is the order in which the scenes are loaded in our build settings. In this case, our skin shop is 0 and our level is 1. Let's go back to Unity. I can press Shift-Ctrl-B to open the build settings, and you can see skin shop has an index of 0 and game has an index of 1. Let's select our play button, and for the button function, I'm gonna drag in scene functions, scene function script, load the level. Alright, and let's give it a test. I'm gonna select the left skin and hit play, and here's my default model. If I close and start again, I can choose the right skin, hit play, and now the red skin is loaded. There are a lot of features that we can add now to the skin shop, but the basic implementation is this one. Let's finish by adding some images to our skin and making a new skin. If it was a 2D skin shop, you could just use the sprite itself as a preview, but in this case we have 3D models. So I'm gonna open the prefabs of the models, go to 3D mode, and take a screenshot. I'm gonna do the same for the red skin, and while it's true that it's better to have some custom-made sprites to give a preview of the 3D model, for now this will do. Let's go back to the scene. I'm gonna import the screenshot that we just made, set the texture type to sprite 2D and UI, and hit apply. Now I'm gonna select the left skin panel, skin image, and drag in the screenshot that I made. I'm gonna do the same for the right skin panel, and drag in the red skin. Of course, this doesn't look very good, but at least we know which skin we are selecting. It's up to you to choose which way of showing a preview of the skin. And finally, let's make a quick recap of the implementation by making a third skin. And this new skin isn't just gonna have a different color, it's also gonna have additional game objects. Before we do that though, let's organize our assets folder a bit. So, create, folder, and I'm gonna make a folder for the models. One for the images, one for the materials, one for the UI, and finally one for the scripts. Now let's go back to the level scene, let's get our normal model, and I'm gonna rename this default skin, and change the new skin to red skin. It's true that we can use different game objects for skins and call it a day. If you need to make a change to all skins though, we will need to call each model and do the action for each prefab, and that is not very safe. Instead, what we want to do is to make each skin that is not the default skin dependent on the default skin. I'm gonna copy the red skin name real quick and then delete it. Let's drag in the default skin inside the player. And now let's select it and drag it into the models. You can see that it will ask you if you want to make a new prefab or a prefab variant. Let's check prefab variant. Let's rename this. And you can see that now the prefab has a different icon. Let's select the materials and let's drag in the red material again. And now let's select again the default skin. Let's go to Mesh Renderer, Modify Component, and now we can choose if we want to apply this red material to the original prefab, which is our default skin, or only to this prefab variant. Let's choose Override Prefab Red Skin. And now we can delete this. And now our default skin is still exactly the same, but the red skin is now a prefab variant of the full skin. If you look into red skin, you can see that our capsule collider is set to not trigger. If you look into default skin, it is exactly the same. If we change is trigger to true, and we look into the red skin, you will see that the red skin, because it is a prefab variant, has inherited the is trigger value. We can always choose to override this value and set it to false, and add the prefab variant as is trigger to false, and the default skin to true. But overall, the default skin, which is the original prefab, has control all over the variants. So if at a certain part of our game production we decide that the player should have is trigger set to true, we don't have to take into account all the different models, we can just use the main prefab. And if we have a different value compared to the main prefab, you will see that that value in particular is set to bold. You can also right click and hit revert to have the value exactly like the main prefab. In this case though, we don't want this trigger to be true, so let's uncheck it. And let's also uncheck it into the main prefab. Alright, and now if we want to make a new skin, let's always make sure to start from the default skin and then to make a prefab variant. We can then just delete the skin and edit the new skin directly. I'm gonna call this hat skin. Let's open it. And as the name suggests, I want to put an hat on our player. So I'm gonna create a new sphere and put it on top. And we can also give it a new material. So let's go back to Assets, Materials, and I'm gonna make a green material. I can then assign it to the hat, rename our sphere to hat, and I'm also gonna remove the collider. And you can see that our hat has like the plus sign. That's because this game object isn't present within the main prefab. But that doesn't matter for us because we only care for this hat to be present within this skin. So let's go back to the scene, models, and here is our new skin. Let's go back to the skin shop and let's make space for a third skin. An easy way to do this is to use a horizontal layout group. So let's select Skins panel, add component, horizontal layout group. Let's then check control child size. Although you can see that the actual scales of our skin panels actually got a bit messed up. That's because we didn't set the anchor points correctly. So let's disable the horizontal layout group. Let's go to UI and let's select our skin panel. Let me bring the equip button at the bottom and change the anchor points to reflect the UI. While for the skin image, the anchor points are already correct. Let's go back to the scene and our skin panels should behave correctly. Let's turn on horizontal layout group again. And let's add some padding on the left and on the right. And finally, let's add some spacing. Now, to make a new skin, we can just duplicate one of our skin panel, and the horizontal layout group will automatically resize the skins for us. You can of course choose to not use a horizontal layout group and move the skins yourself. Let's select this new skin panel, and for the models, let's set the health skin. And for the skin image, we need to make a new screenshot. I'm gonna do that real quick, and let's drag it in. Finally, because we deleted the red skin before, you also have to select the skin panel in the middle again, and select the new red skin that we made. And here we are in our 3D skin shop. I can select the default skin here on the left, and if I hit play, here is our player with a white skin. I can instead press the red skin, equip it, hit play, and here's our red skin. We can also have different character models, like for example this skin, which has a hat. And different skins have no interaction whatsoever with the actual player logic, so the movement of our player isn't dependent on the skin that we choose. And actually, let's also add a default skin for our player, so that if we don't select anything, we still have something for our player model. Let's go to the game scene, player, let's select models, and let's drag in the default skin onto our player. Here he is. Now let's open Skin Loader, and let's make a reference to that default skin that we loaded. We'll have to fill this property into the inspector, so make sure it is not static. And let's assign the default skin. Back to the skin loader, we now want to destroy the default skin if we have a skin to load. To check whether we have a skin to load, we do a null check. Values like GameObject by default are null, so if the value is not null, then it means that we have something inside it. It means that we have equipped a skin. So if we have a skin to equip, we instantiate it, and we also destroy the default skin. And that's it. If you remember, before we had an error if we played the game from here. But now, because the skin value is null, we don't do anything, and we keep the default skin that we put ourselves. But if we start the game from the skin shop, if we decide to equip something, like the red skin, we can still do that. But if we don't do anything, if we don't select a single skin, we can hit play, and instead of equipping a skin, we will keep the default skin that we put ourselves right here. Alright, so that's it for this video. There are some other features that we could add for sure. You can watch my other video where I make a 2D skin shop, where I go a bit faster than this, and I also make some new features, which can also apply to this 3D skin shop. So if you haven't already, make sure to check it out. At least for now, I think that's it for this project, but maybe in the future I make an advanced version of the skin shop, just like I did for the 2D one. If you like this video, please make sure to hit a thumbs up and to subscribe to the channel. I make Unity tutorials all the time, and I have a series on YouTube called Ender's Runner Tutorial. I have about 40 videos in there where I show step by step how to make an Ender's Runner for mobile. Remember that you can always download my newest projects like this one from Github for free. And you can also follow me on Twitter if you want updates on whatever I'm doing, and you can also join my Discord channel if you need some help with your game. All links in the description. This video was requested by a user, so if you have some requests yourself, make sure to tell me in the comments. Alright, so that's it, and I'll see you next time. See ya!